that exists to serve women, children, and pets in crisis from homelessness and domestic abuse and violence. In her role at the Shade Tree, she is responsible for overseeing all aspects of the 38,000 square foot shelter and organization, including development and fundraising, finances, programming, marketing, public relations, and community relations, and management of the facility operations, and sleeps 2 hours a day. She brings to the job more than 2 decades of leadership experience, most recently serving as executive director of St. Jude House in Crown Point, Indiana, a 24-hour shelter, providing services to victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, along with their dependent children. She also served as director of gift services for Family Christian Center in Munster, Indiana. She has been often recognized for the difference she's made in her nonprofit communities and for lending a voice to the women and children affected by domestic violence. In 2016, she was awarded Leaders as Heroes Award for Nonprofits by the South Shore Leadership Center. In 2018, she was named a finalist for the up-and-coming Most Influential Women in Nonprofits by Northwest Indiana's Influential Women Association. She earned her MBA and a Bachelor of Science in Marketing at Purdue University in Hammond, Indiana. Thank you. And next, Liz Ortenburger, come on up. Sweet. Thank you. And she has been fighting for the rights of women and children for more than 2 decades. Prior to joining SafeNest in 2017, she served in leadership positions at the Girl Scouts and the YMCA, working diligently to ensure all youth had the opportunity to thrive through experiences that help them realize their full potential. In her current position as the CEO for SafeNest, she directs her energy and passion to ending the epidemic of domestic violence. From managing operations to leading strategic partnerships to implementing visionary programs and services, Ortenburger is dedicated to ensuring every survivor can have the opportunity to move from crisis to confidence. She earned her MBA at IESE, a globally ranked business school in Barcelona, Spain, and her bachelor's degree at Cal State University, Fresno, which was my big rival in college. Today, Liz is raising 2, and we never lost to Fresno State, by the way. That was, there's no pride there. It was also 52 years ago. Liz is raising 2 happy, healthy children and spends her free time camping, hiking, and running. Thank you. And Elizabeth Abdul-Raheem is the executive director of the Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence, or NCEDSV. It is the statewide agency committed to increasing the capacity of Nevada's agencies serving victim survivors of domestic and sexual violence through training, support, and advocacy. She has devoted her career to building healthy communities in which everyone is safe and included. Prior to coming to Nevada, Elizabeth worked for more than 20 years in New York City with individuals and families experiencing homelessness. That gives you a black belt right there. This work included managing a network of volunteer-run homeless shelters in houses of worship and directing large family homeless shelters. Throughout COVID, she directed the largest multi-service agency serving domestic violence victims in Columbus, Ohio. She also led the 2022 revision of the Ohio Promising Practices Manual for Domestic Violence Programs. She holds an MS in Nonprofit Management from the Milano School of Management and Public Policy and an MBA from the New York University Stern School of Business. She is excited to have her husband and 2 children join her here in Las Vegas in July, but not as excited for the cross-country drive with the dog and cat. And finally, Beth Flory. She is the, here we go, executive director of S.A.F.E.House, which is S.A.F.E.House, which is a comprehensive domestic violence agency located in Henderson. Free services available to survivors and their children include a 24-hour crisis hotline, 62-bed confidential emergency shelter, advocacy and counseling for both adults and children. And the agency also provides outreach and education throughout the Las Vegas Valley. S.A.F.E.House reinstated their batterage treatment program this year as a part of their continuing efforts to prevent future domestic violence. Beth started working for S.A.F.E.House in 2009 and has performed several roles in both direct client services and administration. During her tenure, she became executive director in 2021, and S.A.F.E.House is a proud program member of the Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence, and she currently serves on their board of directors. So thank you. So I'm going to sit down too. Well, first, thank you all for being here. It's so refreshing to have you sitting here, and we've had many different programs back in California and San Jose, and we had the YWCA and community outreach, and what was the other one? Oh yeah, Next Door Solutions to End Domestic Violence, and the collaboration that we saw form as we were there, not because of what we were doing, because the community really grabbed onto with the San Jose PD, and particularly Chief Eddie Garcia, who was the chief of San Jose at that time. He's now chief in Texas, in Dallas. It was remarkable to watch the transformation because of the collaboration. And we were so excited to every one of you we talked to, you talked about collaboration. And that's, as I said earlier, I think it's so critical to do what we need to do to get to the root of the problem. So I've got a few questions for you, and I didn't share any of them with you, but I don't think they're trick questions. The first one should be a softball. So just down the line, you've got to just share about your organization, just a brief history, and your specific mission. So what lane are you in this arena?
Okay.
This is Beth.
So S.A.F.E.House has been around since 1994. It was started by a group of community members, namely Julie Proctor and Ken Proctor. Julie Proctor was a survivor of domestic violence, and so her husband was a judge in Henderson courts. And so together they saw that there was still a need for places for victim survivors to go to get help. And so the two of them, along with a bunch of community members, decided to open S.A.F.E.House. And what was the next part of that question? Our mission is to stop abuse in the family environment. It is an acronym, that's why he spelled out the letters. Through counseling, outreach and education, advocacy, crisis intervention, all the things that we talked about in our bio when we started. So our main focus is domestic violence. We do, however, have a partnership with Signs of Hope, which is a sexual assault organization here in Las Vegas, to help support their victims of sexual assault as well.
Great. Liz.
Hi. So Liz Ortenburger, proud bulldog. So SafeNest has been around since 1977, which is consequently the same year that federal funding became available for domestic violence, and domestic violence became officially illegal. Before that, it was okay to beat a loved one as long as the bruise wasn't bigger than the size of your hand, right? So 1977 is not that long ago. Since then, SafeNest has had two executives. My predecessor, Estelle, who was their first paid employee in 1978, and she retired when I came in 2016. We are laser-like focused on ending the epidemics of domestic and sexual violence, and that includes trafficking, because we fit that under the sexual abuse umbrella. And, you know, we offer many of the services that you will have heard domestic and sexual violence agencies offer, but what we do differently and in a different space is the prevention work that we do. So here's the thing that I've come to learn in this work, and Alessandra's story and everything that we bring to this panel is in this same vein. To end this epidemic, we have to understand that in a movement like ours, creating safe spaces for survivors is one part. How are we not creating a vacancy for a new survivor to be created? And if we are not working with the root causes of this, and while eloquently said domestic violence does not discriminate in the survivor pool, there is absolutely identifying information within the perpetrator pool. And so there is great and innovative and new things that we can do. And so that is really a lane, and we work in the entire continuum, but I wanted to highlight that focus because I don't think it gets talked about enough.
Thank you.
Thank
Linda.
you. I'm Linda Perez. I'm the CEO of the Shade Tree currently, and I'm also a survivor. The Shade Tree has been around since 1989, and I could tell you all of our services and all of the great stuff along with our other partners here, but you can see all the work that we do. You can look it up because I want to spend my time telling you that we do have our clients are domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking, as well as homeless, women, children, and pets. We also take in pets. I want to share, again, the Shade Tree has all these amazing services, but as a survivor, I want to share that this story, thank you for sharing Alessandra's story, because we need to not just do what we do, but we need to really make sure that the community understands that it is every family that this affects. 1 in 4, 1 in 7 men means that if you take a step back and you reflect on those numbers, that means that either you, someone you know, someone you love, has or will be affected by domestic violence in their lifetime if we don't start talking about it. When we put a name to the face, when we show that this happens in families, that's when we can really make a difference. Alessandra is a daughter, she is a sister, she is a friend, and we need to start looking at the clients that we're serving. Yes, we can tell you all the numbers, we can tell you a million statistics, but the reality is that this crisis affects every single one of our families, and we as providers and as the communities need to start working together so that we can start bringing more awareness and more education to our families. I have Alessandra as well. I shared that with them when they first contacted us. She was killed on January 2nd, 2016. She was a client at my previous shelter that I ran in Indiana, and she was no longer a in-service client, but she was a non-residential client, which means that she finished her program, she was in her life, but she came to us continuously for case management, for our life skills, and for us to be cheerleaders for her. We were so proud of her. She got a job, she started a Mary Kay business, and the system failed her. 2 days before they were going to court for the very last time, that court date was postponed. He ended up going to her workplace and murdering her. So when I met them, I said, wow, God works in mysterious ways, right? So that's what I want to tell you. Yes, I'm the CEO of the Shade Tree, and we are a shelter here in the state of Nevada, and we have all the services and all of those things that we can share with you, but we also need partners. We can't do it alone. And the 4 of us, our organizations, it's not enough. We don't have enough beds. We don't have enough of the resources in the community. And that's why we need to start working better together. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
Hi, so I am Elizabeth Abdul-Raheem. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. And unlike the other women on this panel, we are not a direct service provider, so the coalition sits in a very unique space in this sphere. Our coalition here in Nevada has been around since 1980, and the federal legislation made space for each state to have coalitions to support both our domestic violence serving agencies and our sexual violence serving agencies. Here in Nevada, we're what we are called a dual coalition. So we have both the domestic violence and the sexual violence agencies. And our role is really to support and uplift this work that happens 24/7, 365, that is exhausting, that causes such burnout, right, that is so difficult. How are we giving our agencies support so that they can truly do this? And also, how are we working with our policy partners and legislatively, right, so that people have the tools and the funding they need to do this work? I know you all heard, I've been doing domestic violence and sexual assault and just basic violence and homeless work directly on the lines for 25 years, so it's nice to be in the coalition role. But it's also a space where I say, I know we need so much when we're out there. And so the coalition fits a need for things that we know need to be done, but our direct service providers are exhausted and they don't have the space and the resources to do those things. So we provide training for our advocates, we provide community training. We also do a lot of convening of people, right? Getting people around the table so we can figure out where we need to go in Nevada so that we are no longer on the bottom of all of our country lists, right? The states that are performing the worst. So we're working to pull that together. And of course, during the legislative session, we are working extremely hard, as are our member agencies too, to make sure that we get common sense legislation through this session, because we won't have another chance for 2 years.
Thank you. Yeah, I think when you talk about resources, and we found this in California as well, and everywhere, there's a small pool of resources for you guys to draw from, and there's 3 of you, going to the same pot. And when you say it's not enough, in Thursday night when we went to the public safety town hall, and the sheriff was there, I mean, the thing that all the people in law enforcement were saying is they don't have enough resources. They don't have enough resources. You don't have enough resources. So I would just encourage everybody. The hardest thing to do maybe is to pick up the phone and meet your local legislator, but get over it and go do it. Because all of our voices matter. The people we elect matter, and where they spend our tax money matters. And when you look at the prevention side of domestic violence or just any violence, you all need more help. And I think that's been plain from what we heard Thursday night, and what you'll hear later from the Las Vegas Municipal Police Department folks is more resources are needed. Okay, how do we do that? And one of the things I'll tell all of you right now in your advocacy work is I'll just a brief history. In California, our county supervisor was Cindy Chavez, who was the Board of Supervisors president at the time. She's our very good friend, and she, along with the YWCA and Next Door Solutions and Community Services, when they heard Alessandra's story, they said, would you please stand up and tell that? And Santa Clara County, I believe, I don't remember what, 2017 maybe, in the Santa Clara County, they have the Valley Medical Center, which is owned by the county and operated. It's the biggest medical center there. So they were pouring money into that, but they didn't have any money to help the domestic violence providers with what they were doing, or there was very little collaboration with the police departments. So Cindy says, will you guys stand up and be the poster children to help us get more money? And they went from 0 to, and we stood up with the other folks, they went from 0 to $5 million in the first year. And I'm very shy, so when I stood up and did my thing, I said, well, $5 million's a really nice start. I think we need more. So the next year it went to 10 million. The next year it went to 15 million. And at that meeting, which was probably the last meeting before COVID, I said, well, you guys, this is a really good start. Because if you don't speak up, if I sold stuff my whole life, I never got an order I didn't ask for. So if you want something, ask for it. And don't be shy, particularly when you're in the space you're in. So I will pledge to you right now, wherever you want me to go and us to go, to stand up to ask for resources, you've got our phone number. We will be there.
I want to share with everybody sensitivity because in the news has been ARPA funding, right? All states got a lot of ARPA funding. In Nevada, some went to the state, some went to the county, some went to the city. Not $1 of state, county, or city money has gone to expanding confidential bed count in Nevada. We are statistically the 7th most dangerous place in the country over the last 10 years for women being murdered by men. We have in Clark County 20,000 domestic violence charges every year, just over 1,000 rape charges, and just over 200 sex trafficking charges. We have on average 30,000 bed nights needs that are not met for highly confidential victims. And I tell you this next part not as because they shouldn't have gotten funded, but as to understand the state and the county that you're in. Hope for Prisoners, 80% of our prisoners have domestic violence in their record, got $4 million to expand their programs. If we don't stand up and push against county commissioners in particular and the city council in Las Vegas, none of this will change because you have a mayor who does not believe domestic violence is as big of an issue despite having had her lethality report read to her of how many that were murdered, including a 1-year-old child. So your voices matter because they hear from us all the time. And we share this with them consistently and openly and factually and well. But until they start hearing from the voting members of their public and people that have a voice off the street for whom may not have been directly affected but are sickened by the idea that this is happening, we will not be able to advocate for change. So please use your voices to help educate. We have a mayoral race coming up in 2024. Go to a fundraiser. You don't have to pay for a plate. That's the trick, right? Go to a fundraiser, just raise your hand and say, what are you going to do about domestic violence? What resources, what specifically are you going to do? If my daughter is raped on the Strip tonight, what specifically are you going to do to influence that pipeline in your mayoral candidacy? That is how we push for change. It has got to be vocal.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Liz. And behind that, I want to say I haven't been in Nevada that long. And when I got here, I said, why don't we have a line item in our state budget? And I have been consistently told that saying line item in Nevada is pointless. But he just reminded us, when we don't ask for things, we don't get them. Budgets are moral documents. The fact that we have no line item for domestic violence and sexual violence in our state budget says something about the priorities of our politicians and then about the priorities of ourselves as a community. And so we have to go and say, we need space. This can happen. I will tell you, I just came from Ohio where there was no line item. In 2019, we got $1 million, and this year, that governor put up $20 million in his own budget. It can happen. But we have to ask for it. And just like Liz said, it can't just be us asking for it, right? We are in Carson City every day. My policy director sits there every day and says, I'm the policy director for the Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. You know what? They all know her. They need to see other people and know that other people also want to see these things happen.
Thank you. I think, I've talked earlier about a calling. And probably the toughest part for both Diane and I, or Diane and me, is when we're asked by people like Cindy Chavez to stand up and ask. Fear is a motivating factor if you let it be. And I've said this many times when I've been questioned on why am I doing this? Aren't you afraid? I go, listen, my daughter was murdered. What the heck am I afraid of? I'm not. I am not afraid of any. I'm not afraid of. I have no problem approaching the governor. I don't care who they are. I have no problem approaching them and talking to them about domestic violence because it's very hard, and it was easier during COVID because you're on a Zoom call. It was very easy for the people in California to say no to a mom and dad whose daughter was murdered, and they don't want to support what you're trying to do, and they give you no advice, and they're all great people. I am not criticizing them. It's a different place in California. But to do it on a Zoom call is one thing, but when we stand up in front of people, it's kind of hard to say, yeah, I don't think that's that big a deal to us, unless you have no soul. And so I'm here to tell you, you tell us where to go, and you can prop us up and we'll go cry later. And we will stand up, because I have no problem challenging people to do the right thing for the right reason. So thank you. So I have a couple more questions, but I want to take just, you've already answered most of them already, which I figured you would. So maybe real quickly, what's the most effective tool that you have found that you've been able to use to reduce domestic violence? Is there one?
Yeah, well, let me just start to say that we're going to continue to make a dent in what we do. And just going back a little bit, Rick, we can talk about the funding, and that's so important, but there's also another way to support and use your voice and be aware, and that's get involved. Get involved by volunteering, get involved by using whatever resources you have, because we never have enough. And I don't just mean funding. I mean, when I work every single day in the shelter with our clients, I see it day in and day out. And being a survivor, my goal is to make sure that not only do we provide them with the programming while they're in the shelter, we're now extending our programming beyond what our program is, because 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days for human trafficking victims is not enough. We're helping them be sustainable for their lives. So that takes work too. So along with funding, it's mental health services, it's medical, it's all of these things, it's life skills, life enhancement. So it's a lot of things in addition to the funding. So I just wanted to stress that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, you know, the stark reality is that by the time they've called me, it's too late. So when I came into the organization 6 years ago, I said, I want people to stop calling, right? We don't want to be in the survivor space, not because survivors aren't critical, but because there aren't any. So we started working backwards and looking at the data around children, right? And so here's the known data. 76% of kids growing up in domestic violence households repeat the cycle on both sides, as a survivor or as an abuser. So then we started saying, okay, how do we, bolster the programming that we have that for the kids that come in, right? Because we take moms, kids, and pets, and dads, and kids, and lots of kids. In fact, 60% of our shelter beds are normally kids, right? So we started that, but then we said even more broadly, right? Because even when the kids get to us, they still need a lot. So we started a program that's actually it's out of a program in California called Camp Hope. This year we will take 200 kids away to summer camp for a week. These kids have all experienced domestic violence in their households, and most of them have also been sexually abused. Boys and girls. And the whole entire program is designed to do two things. One is give you a piece of your childhood back, because we go horseback riding, archery, river rafting. We have tons of fun. But the other thing is every morning is started with a hope story. And a hope story is someone that is normal, like us, right? Like not Oprah, right? Because that feels unattainable for most people. People like you and me and those of you sitting in the audience, we share with these kids stories of folks that had really tough childhoods. Like the former assistant district attorney in San Diego who was 14 when his mom was deported. His dad was an alcoholic, and he had to raise his 3 siblings, get good grades, and put himself through law school, and became the assistant district attorney in San Diego, right? When we tell that story to our kids that are undocumented, mom's been beaten up every which way from Sunday, they've been abused, right? When we talk about what that looks like, and here's someone that figured it out, and here's what he shares in his story, these little nuggets, we have fortified the next generation of kiddos from moving forward with violence. This program has been going on nationally for 20 plus years. We've been doing it for 5. There is not one documented case of a child in this program repeating the cycle. And I'll share with you one other piece of that. 2 years ago, we had Junior Iona, a Raiders alumni, come up to the camp. I don't know if any of you know Junior, but he's like 7 feet tall and like 5 feet wide. Like, he's a big, massive man. We camp at this place. There's a river there, and they said, Utah said, you can't fish in that river. Well, Junior made a few calls, and we were fishing in that river. He's standing there, and I'm off on the bank with a couple of my counselors, and we've got like 15 8 and 9-year-old little black and brown boys in the creek with Junior fishing. And they did not ask him one question about football. They asked him, how did you not join a gang? Because Junior grew up for a period of his childhood in Compton. Why do you not hit your wife? Right? What if she gets mouthy? What about you have a daughter, what about your daughters? And Junior just kept sharing with them that it was important for him to be the kind of man he wanted to be. That domestic violence cycle was broken in that river that day. That is what matters. So I will tell you, our work is hard and it's not for everybody. And volunteering in our space, we have very well-intentioned volunteers that cycle through pretty quick because this is tough. But if you can become a big brother or big sister to a child, make an impact in a child's life, because these kids need it. And they just need a simple little push to not be repeating these cycles and having these role models. And that's the space that we work in.
So just to piggyback off Liz here, because I actually 100% agree with you with our youth, and I think the rest of us do. When we talk about these cycles, it is about what you grew up in. We heard it from Alessandra's ex, right? This is where you grew up. So we have a volunteer program also where individuals can come in and volunteer. And oftentimes when our volunteers come in, we ask, like, why are you here? Like, what brought you in our door? And they're like, some history of domestic violence, a family member themselves that experienced this. And one thing that they, say they want to do is to help a woman in this situation. And so we have a conversation. We say there's different types of advocacy that you can do. There's individual advocacy. That's going in and that's being that role model. One of the most protective factors that helps teenagers is having a strong role model in their life besides their parent. This has been proven, data is there that says it. But there's also institutional advocacy. That's changing how different institutions treat survivors of domestic violence as well as abusive partners. And then there's also social change advocacy. Right now, we have domestic violence because our society allows it to happen. It allows it to happen. It allows it to happen through our justice system. I cannot tell you the number of court hearings we've heard where we've heard judges say things that will blow your mind. We had a judge tell one of our victim survivors who was with her husband for 13 years, has lived here in the United States longer than that, tell her that the only reason that she was in that courtroom was to get a green card. The only reason. The stuff that we hear would blow your minds.
These judges are elected by you. Think about that.
Yes, exactly. They are elected by us. One thing that I learned coming into this field that I've really grown in is how impactful our state legislature truly is. We have our Nevada revised statutes. That's putting up these laws that define what domestic violence is, that define what sexual assault is, and define the remedies that can come from perpetrating these crimes. And so then it's also on our justice system to ensure that those victims are heard and believed and those abusers are held accountable. So I think that probably, in my opinion, is also one of the biggest areas that we can go as a community that we can work together to tackle.
Thank you.
Obviously we agree with everything that's being said here, and we will just agree with each other. But to also talk about...
That's good for collaboration.
Yes. What Beth said about we allow it to happen, right? We also allow it to happen because our community is not well educated, right? We're not well educated on what healthy relationships are, right? Our children are not well educated on healthy relationships, especially our children who aren't growing up, witnessing healthy relationships in their home. But also, a lot of people, right? February was Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, and I will tell you that we went to the government and asked for a proclamation against teen dating violence and could not get it. So that's stark, right? We're not even willing to say that our teens should not accept violence in their dating life. And we have to be willing to talk about it with our children at the youngest ages in appropriate language, right? So that we understand what a healthy relationship looks like. A couple weeks ago, we had an alternative spring break group here from the University of Utah. They volunteered at the Shade Tree one day. They came with us and did an activity we called In Her Shoes, where they walk through and make choices at each space. It was actually developed by a parent had it developed by researchers because her daughter was killed in a teen dating violence situation. And they learned that sometimes there aren't right answers, right? There aren't right choices, right? Like you can make all the right choices and it still sometimes doesn't work. But at the end, we talked to the kids and said, you know, you do the debrief like you always do. And they said, there are things we never realized about our current relationships that are not healthy. Right? And there were both male and female people on this trip saying, we didn't know we didn't have healthy relationships. And we have to do that education. People have to be able to see it long before it gets to this space, because domestic violence is not about the bruises you see. It is about power, control, and isolation. And if we are not doing that education, we will not be able to end it.
Wow. Well,
Can I add one more thing
please.
to that? Sorry.
This is an open forum.
Yeah, you know, I always, because I take it from the victim side, because obviously being a survivor and exactly what Liz was saying about the statistics with children, I'm one of those statistics growing up in a domestic violence home. So I'm going to keep talking about that from that side and healthy relationships. People don't realize that when you're a teenager, when you're starting out getting intimate and all of those things in a relationship, if domestic violence isn't just physical, people think that, well, he doesn't hit me. Well, that's not all domestic violence is. It is emotional, it is verbal, it is financial, and we, if we're not educating our families and each other, that's how we end up in situations like that. And I think it's very important to understand domestic violence has so many different factors, and healthy relationships are important. If someone is not treating you right, if someone is calling you outside of your name, that's abuse. If they are not lifting you up, if they are not supportive, if they are not your biggest cheerleader and they're demeaning you, that's abuse. And I think children, teenagers, we need to understand that abuse is far more than physical.
And I think that the important thing when you to get to education, when this all first came to me, the education was the first thing that came, because I just started thinking about it. So, well, why do people turn out like this? And so I did lots of research, and one of our nephews who's on the board is an attorney, and he did the research on what can we do legislatively. But so we dug in with Next Door Solutions and the YWCA to say, okay, well, you know, there's got to be ways we can educate children in an appropriate way at all ages. Well, the YWCA developed, and it may have been in Nashville, and you guys may know more about this than me, but they have educational programs age appropriate at elementary, middle school, high school, and college age. And so we heard that from Tanis Crosby, who at the time was CEO. And I go, that's great. Well, as a member of the board of directors of the Silicon Valley Chamber of Commerce, one of the staff people happened to be the president of the school board of the San Jose Unified School District, the largest school district in the area. So Diane and I go, well, ding, let's go talk to Susan and talk to the Board of Supervisors. And how do we get these programs? Because at the time, out of I believe it's 180,000 kids at the time, not exact statistics, 9,500 children were exposed to this education. One school district in San Jose area, one school district. So think about that. It's also important to get to CCSD here. I don't know what they well, that tells you all about you need to know. But these programs are available. They weren't sitting there going, hey, we're going to charge you $1 million for it. Just let us, and it was very successful in Evergreen School District, which was a tough part of town. And so we met with the president of the school board, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. Think about that. And this isn't a political issue. It's a common sense issue. When I went to school, a million years ago, they taught me math, they taught me how to read, they taught me how to write, they encouraged me how to behave. They weren't very successful. But that was it. All that stuff that, they teach now, and when our kids were in high school, it was pretty okay. But Diane and I were involved. We went to all the parent-teacher conferences, we went back to school night, and the first thing that we did was ask them, I want to see the curriculum for every class that my kids are going to be in. And there were certain things that we said, no, you're not going to do that. We do that at home. I'm a parent. That's my responsibility. You don't do that. And so the last thing any of these teachers wanted to see was Diane coming through the door saying, what are you doing? Okay, but you got to get involved, and it goes to this subject. You got to get involved. Get off the bench and get in the game. And you guys have done that. And we are so honored to know you, for one. And we're glad to be becoming partners with you. And I've said it before, but anytime you need us to support whatever you're doing, we don't offer services. We offer opportunity. We offer this, forums. This won't be the last one we do. I don't know how that's going to evolve. That's not up to us. But we were told, as we prayed into this, the Lord said, when somebody asks you to speak, you go speak. You never say no. And we have done it in places that we didn't want to go, but we still did it because people need to hear about it. So if you would join me in thanking these great servants for what they do. And if you don't mind, we'd like to pray for you in your mission. So, Father, I thank you for these mighty women who have such a task. And I pray, above all, that you would refresh them, that you would give them energy, that you would continue to give them keen minds and give them favor. I pray the high favor of God upon